Welcome to Mission Innovation powered by AWS. I'm Renzo Rodriguez, Managing Director of U.S. Federal Technology and Innovation at AWS. In this inaugural episode, we're diving into a critical cybersecurity topic, building zero trust architectures. In today's digital landscape, federal agencies face unprecedented challenges in securing their complex IT infrastructure. Traditional security models are no longer sufficient, which is why federal departments like the DoD and CISA have mandated zero trust architectures across the various branches and agencies. But what is zero trust and how can it be effectively implemented? Our very own partner solution architect leader, Mike Pitcher, introducing the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator, also known as ZTEA, which is designed to meet the DoD's most stringent security requirements. And finally, we'll dive deep into ZTEA's technical details, exploring how it leverages AWS services and integrates with leading security vendors. Now, whether you're a DoD official, a cybersecurity professional, or simply curious about how cloud technology enhances national security, this episode has something for you. It's time to learn and be curious. Let's get started.
Now, I'd like to introduce Mike Pitcher, Senior Manager of our Federal Partner Solutions Architecture Organization at AWS and the lead architect behind the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator solution. Mike has been instrumental in helping to share our approach to zero trust for our federal customers. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Renzo. Yeah, happy to be here.
Now, before we dive into the specifics of the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator solution, could you kind of give us a brief overview of your role in creating the solution?
Definitely a great team behind me. I've had the privilege of leading a team of solution architects focused on zero trust for the last 2 years across public sector. So countless conversations with customers at this point. We've really been able to listen to the challenges they've been having, the concerns they've been having. Obviously in the DoD, there's mandates for having all the target level activities addressed by 2027. So, and plans were due at the end of last year. There's been a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah. And we're pretty confident what we've put together with the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator is going to help meet some of those needs.
So let's dive a little bit deeper in regards to the DoD agency challenges. Talk to me about that specifically, and how does the ZTEA address the solution?
Yeah, I think for challenges, for one, we talk to a lot of mission owners, and there's a lot of different layers to their environment. So they may get enterprise services from one part of the organization. The laptops they use to access the environment are actually owned by a different part of the organization. There's a baseline to those, and the changes to those are outside of their purview. There's different layers, I guess, that make it difficult, and that includes the accreditation. Sometimes these are 3 different accreditation packages, different authorizing officials, so it's not as easy just to say, here's your zero trust solution. It actually takes working with a number of different organizations to make all the things happen for a particular mission partner or workload.
So what are the most significant challenges that the DoD faces in regards to implementing zero trust?
Sometimes the contracts and things don't allow for, like marketplace, for example. So the solution we put together, there's some native services, there's also some partner solutions, and you can get all those things through marketplace. But we work in some spaces with customers where marketplace isn't possible through the contract they have in place. So there's even contractual limitations. But I feel pretty good about what we've put together, right? It's a modular solution. Step one for us, it's almost a consultative type engagement where we really evaluate what a customer has today. Mm-hmm. We want to leverage existing investments wherever we can, not just the investments in the tools or the services themselves, the investments in the people that have learned how to use these things over the years. It's not easy just to say, rip and replace and put in this thing or move to this other cloud and you'll be zero trust, right? Like that's just not reality. So step one for us, what do you have in place today that we can use? What can we possibly reconfigure? And I think the other thing too with that is the DoD came out with some overlays back in June this year that showed how those zero trust activities map to the NIST 853 Rev 5 controls. And just by having an ATO that aligns to NIST 853 and Rev 5 or Rev 4, you actually meet over half the zero trust activities already. So,
okay, walk me through at a high level how we're potentially integrating AWS solutions with third-party solutions. What does that actually look like?
And there's variability to that answer. One, leveraging existing investments. That's step one, as I mentioned. Step two is giving customers options. Yeah. So it's not to say you have to use this particular AWS service. I like to think we have one of the best, if not the best, ecosystem of partners as well. So it's really talking to the customer, and maybe the native service doesn't make sense, right? Maybe a partner solution is the better solution. A good example would be we have Amazon Verified Access, which is a zero trust network access type solution. But that really works well for workloads that are in AWS. If it's a hybrid environment or a multi-cloud environment, maybe a third-party solution makes more sense. You can have ubiquity across environments. So, that's part of the consultative engagement as well as like, does a native service make sense? or does a partner solution make sense? I do think there are some core native services that absolutely make sense, like guard duty, for example. That's a service that AWS provides that you basically check a box and turn it on. There's immediate value, and it profiles and gets better over time. And it's a machine learning based threat detection platform that, that would be hard for a third party to replicate, just given the data that looks at. So that's a good idea for any production AWS workload.
Yeah.
So I think there are some exceptions to that, but certainly we want to give customers choice. That's really the second tenet of our solution.
No, that's perfect. And then we all know within the DoD they operate missions in multiple classification levels. Mm-hmm. So how does the ZTEA solution abide by those particular levels?
Yeah. So the first thing is we have a set of partners that we've invested time into integrating into our lab, validating, that they do align to the activities the way we've discussed how they align, but then we've tested it in our lab. When we've proved out those integrations, we've got those lessons learned. All the partners that we're working with are impact level 5, right? Okay. So, and some of them, at least the SaaS platforms, right? There's a couple that are self-hosted as well. But so I think that's step one for addressing sensitive unclassified environments, right? So QE environments for the DoD. So they're in GovCloud, they're IL5. We have our IC marketplace in the secret and TS region, which is a way to get AMIs vended for particular partner solutions in those environments that have been vetted, that are from partners that are FOCI mitigated and can operate in those environments. But to be honest, there's still some work to be done there. So we're just breaking ground now with a couple SaaS partners in the secret and TS region. But that's a new thing in that space, right? And I think it's an area where we, industry and the government, really need to lean in and get creative with the way we contract, with the policies we put in place, so we can get that innovation to the government in those classified regions. So I think there's still some work to be done there. We're excited about the progress we've made already with offering software as a service in those environments. But certainly that's going to continue to be something we work on over the next couple of years and continue to help the government innovate and really buy solutions rather than having to buy the building blocks and put it together.
Yeah. Mike, I want to thank you so much for being part of this show today to talk to us about the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator solution, also known as ZTEA. It's time to dive deeper into the technical aspects of implementing the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator solution. To guide us through this, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Tyler Replogle, Principal Solutions Architect in our U.S. Federal Partners team.
Thank you, Renzo, for going over the customer challenges that we're seeing in the federal space with our partners as well, and for talking about, with Pitcher here, our Amazon response to Zero Trust. What I want to do now is talk about the nuts and bolts of the technical aspects of this architecture. In fact, we have up here a diagram that shows the architecture of the solution. What I'd like to hear from you, Mike, is what does this solution look like, and how do we go through and use the components for that solution to be able to create an end-to-end Zero Trust solution?
So we're actually going to walk through two diagrams. Again, as talked about with Renzo, optionality, flexibility. So the first one we're looking at here is actually more managed services. So Renzo asked me the question around native versus partner. So this one is more of a managed services. It's making more use of AWS native services. So this is a really good option or a good starting point, probably better said, for something in region. So to address the user pillar and I'll go by the DoD pillars, noting that, this has broad applicability, not just to the DoD, right? So CISA has, 5 pillars in the maturity model, but there's a lot of overlap, right, between them. So, just focusing kind of on the DoD pillars since, we had less here earlier. So for the user pillar, what we're using here is Okta, and that's integrating with IAM Identity Center. So Okta is basically, helping with the authentication of the user, right? So they're going to log in. It's either going to be a CAC for if this is DoD, maybe it's MFA. So they're gonna authenticate the user, and then they're pass that to IAM Identity Center, and that's where we have attributes, and we can do some identity federation and use that identity kind of throughout the entire data flow here. The device signal is going to come from CrowdStrike. So in this particular solution, again, this is not a one size fits all. There's other partners out there that we can get a device signal from. We can even get it from competitors if we need to, and that's okay too. We understand in these complex environments that's going to be the case. But for this particular diagram, CrowdStrike is where we're getting that device signal. So that's all going to pass to Amazon verified access or AWS verified access. So basically what this is doing, this is going to create a software-defined routing path to the workload that's running on a container in AWS Fargate. So kind of the core fundamentals when you really take a step back and think about what is zero trust, right? No longer fundamentally relying on network perimeters. What does that mean? It means we're going to fuse identity in each and every little thing that we do. It's no longer the case where you VPN, now you can hit all the corporate things, right? So what we're doing here is we're taking a device signal, right? And again, that's coming from CrowdStrike. So is this device patched? Is this device, one, is it managed? Does it have all the things that we need to have for security perspective? Is it patched? It may look at things like location, things like that. So, and then we're going to get that identity from Okta. We're going to fuse all that together and we're going to make a decision. Does this person coming in at this time from this device, are they allowed to have access to this workload that's running on this container in Fargate? So we're fusing that identity to the network to make that decision. And then once we make that decision, we're going to continuously evaluate it. So each and every access request, the same way we do to our front door with AWS that lives on the internet, we're going to revalidate that. So maybe that baseline on that device changes. Maybe all of a sudden, there's something that does get installed that's a vulnerable version of something, right? And that ZT score from the device changes. We can kill that connection, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive list. I do remember back in the day when I was doing this, it was IP address that you would be like, is this person valid because they're coming from this IP address?
Yeah, it's crazy
that's
now,
no longer good enough, right? Like somebody can use a proxy and be able to say, I'm coming from so and so, so we can't trust just IP addresses anymore.
Yeah, I just think about today, right? Like I did some work at home. I'm here today. I'm actually going to a different office this afternoon. I'll probably go back home later. Maybe I'll be on, my docking station instead of my Wi-Fi. So, maybe I'll be on my MiFi from Starbucks. So in the course of a day,
right,
5, 6, 10 different IP addresses, right? So even just moving floors in a building sometimes. So yeah, that is no longer a way we can identify, somebody anymore.
Definitely. And the kind of double clicking on that, it seems to be what we're doing now for those devices is we're doing really a certification on that device that's being used to be able to authorize that individual.
Yeah, well, and authorize the device. There's
right.
kind of the two things together. But yeah, looking at the device posture where we can, right? Look, there's going to be some times where, maybe we're talking about a BYOD or a workload that allows just somebody in from a mobile phone too, right? And we may not always be able to get that device posture, but we need to evaluate the workload and make that risk-based decision. Are we comfortable with that? If this is a public website that doesn't have super sensitive data, then maybe we can just do some sort of just kind of rely on the identity and an MFA to let that individual in and see that. If we're talking about highly sensitive HR, PII data, then you're probably going to want that device signal, but everybody can kind of make that risk-based decision with their authorizing official and determine what makes the most sense. But certainly if you're talking about administrative access to a workload, you're going to want, that to come from a managed device that has, healthy status as far as being patched and compliant.
Yeah. So speaking about the authorizing official, it seems like, each of the agencies has a different way that they want to do something. There's many different pillars. You talked about the DoD ones. They all kind of track back to NIST. But one of the things that intrigued me the most about this architecture and the solution that you provided is that's very flexible. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. And we showed before about really the native way for Amazon to have it, but there's also an option where you're having more kind of partner focus, where we're bringing in the APN and the Amazon Partner Network to be able to help facilitate that solution. Can you walk us through what the differences are and why someone might pick one over the other?
Sure, yeah. And so, what you're seeing here now is this is one that we actually have working all the way down to a Snowball Edge, right? So that's a device we can actually be disrupted in connectivity for a period of time. So this could be a device that gets deployed on particular customer mission, be it in the DoD, or even just, in federal civilian with FEMA, disaster relief, like those kind of things. So this can tolerate a period of time, a number of days of being actually totally disrupted in connectivity. In that scenario, a managed service that operates in the cloud, that doesn't really work, right? So in this particular scenario, we've adopted some additional partner solutions. So you'll see here introduced, we still have Okta doing our identity piece and really addressing our user pillar. We still have CrowdStrike for our device pillar and kind of evaluating the managed endpoints. But from a network perspective, we have Zscaler now doing ZTEA. So they have a private service edge that can run on that Snowball, or you'll see in the diagram here on an Outpost potentially as well. So an Outpost requires a little bit more connectivity than a Snowball Edge, and there's use cases around that. That's something that goes in a customer's data center. or gets racked in some type of, maybe even a mobile data center, which is another thing that we have, right? So that private service edge allows for that disruptive connectivity. So it allows for us to do that same thing that we saw with verified access, where we take the identity, we take the device posture, we make that decision, and then we provide a software-based routing path basically to our workload that doesn't exist otherwise. So it's basically, you can't even see it until you've kind of brokered that connection through Zscaler, and it creates that path for you. So we're using that in this scenario because of that private service edge, and allows us to operate in more environments, potentially even a situation where it's in AWS and on-prem, multi-cloud, just gives us some more ability to operate across different environments. So we introduced that here. The other thing we've introduced here is, instead of OpenSearch potentially or Lambda, we have Splunk, which can operate in, self-hosted instead of the SaaS instance here, and run locally on that Snowball Edge or that outpost. And it gives us that visibility and monitoring. It also gives us the automation through their SOAR playbooks that we can put into place for activities that we see that could be suspicious. It can kind of break down those connections. The same thing we were doing with like Lambda in the previous diagram.
It's really interesting though to see the flexibility there. Lots of options that are coming in. I'm a data person, so like to talk about data, databases, flow as well as data. So I'm interested to see with this architecture, what does a data flow look like, and how do we ensure that it's encrypted at rest and in transit throughout it?
Yeah, so the application, and we'll kind of stick with the diagram we have up now with kind of the more partner-centric solutions, right? So Coverse is really giving us that almost like cell level, in a database. You can do it by row, table, column, right? Like you can kind of break it down differently, but it's looking at the attributes of the individual coming in. So we've pulled that through Okta. Right. And does that individual have access to that very particular fine-grained field? Right. So, and that's where, we can do some things around our things tagged as PII. You talk about interoperability for DoD customers, right? Are we working with a mission partner that potentially can see some data, but not all? So, what's really cool is, and, we have a demo, and, in the call to action, we'll provide some resources where folks can see this, but we actually have a common operating picture. And we look at that from a uniform DoD, potentially soldier or sailor, and they can see missile sites and things like that. And then we have like a Five Eyes partner view, right? And they can see some assets, but they can't see those missile sites. So like we can actually be working, and this is really cool, right? Because this is where Zero Trust now helps. It's not just a way that we do the things we used to do more securely. It's actually unlocking ways that we can work with partners and actually allowing us to do things we couldn't do before, where, we're on a joint mission potentially with a mission partner, and we're looking at the same common operating picture, but we see slightly different things, based on roles and who people are. So like what that can do for us in the future as we do things jointly, again, in the DoD or back to that FEMA use case potentially where there's multiple government agencies working together, it can really kind of unlock some things in those mission areas, which is exciting. Yeah.
So one thing before we wrap up that I wanted to see here is just like, what's your favorite thing about this solution? If you're going to tell somebody one thing about the solution, what would it be?
I think it's not just probably the leveraging existing investments, kind of where I started with Renzo. It's just, as I mentioned, some of the challenges, just the different layers, the different kind of complexities in these environments, the different kind of ownership of different pieces of environments. So there's a lot of great stuff that customers are doing that is going to apply to a Zero Trust architecture. So leveraging those, let's not rip and replace things. Let's not move things to a new environment. So I think just that optionality, the flexibility, and what that provides now, but also for the future as missions change.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. What I want to do now is help viewers that are at home. Like, how can they get started today? They probably heard about this solution now. They want to know what they can do to get started. Where do they go? How do they contact you? How do they work with the team for this?
Yeah, so we have a couple of resources here on the screen. So we have a landing page for our federal Zero Trust team and partners. We also have a couple of broadcast videos that are out there, so we'll link those as well. But certainly get engaged, right? So there's a on that landing page that you see here on the screen, you actually go and say, there's a contact us button. So, I'd love for either myself or the team to engage with customers. The more customer conversations we have, the better we can make things for them, right? So we're happy to engage and really talk about what we can do to get this in place in whatever form makes sense for them.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming today and talking to us about the Zero Trust Enterprise Accelerator. And thank you for watching our first video that we have on this series of mission innovation powered by AWS, and for you to see how AWS can enable you to build at the speed of mission. If you find this content engaging, please like, subscribe, hit the bell button, and let us know about any other solutions you'd like to hear about.